The rain fell in relentless, slanting sheets against the thin glass of their third-floor apartment window, mirroring the storm brewing inside. Each drop that struck the pane seemed to punctuate the cold silence that had stretched between Alex and Isabella for the last hour. The air was thick with unspoken words, heavy with the scent of microwaved noodles and the damp wool of Alex's work coat, which he hadn't bothered to hang up. Isabella sat at their small, wobbly kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she hadn't touched. Her knuckles were white. Across from her, Alex paced the worn patch of carpet between the kitchenette and the living room, his movements tight and agitated, like a caged animal. He was a man wound by ambition, and tonight the spring was about to break. "I just don't see how we can do this, Izzy," he said, his voice a low, frustrated growl. He stopped pacing and ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. "A baby. Right now. Do you have any idea what this does to the 5-year plan?" Isabella flinched at the phrase. The 5-year plan was Alex's gospel, a meticulously crafted roadmap to success that involved him becoming a senior manager at Innovate Solutions, them moving to a condo downtown, and finally maybe thinking about a family. It was a plan that had no room for detours, and she, with the nascent life growing inside her, had just become the biggest detour of all. "It's not a thing that does something to a plan, Alex," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. She looked down at her stomach, still flat but holding the most profound secret of her life. "It's our baby." "Our baby?" He scoffed, a bitter, ugly sound that made her stomach clench. "It's a complication. It's an expense we can't afford. It's an anchor. I'm this close to getting the promotion. Harrison is finally noticing me. I'm putting in 70-hour weeks. And you're working part-time as a waitress, barely covering your own expenses. How, Isabella? You tell me how we are supposed to afford this." Every word was a calculated blow. He knew her job at the corner bistro was a source of shame for her. She had a degree in graphic design, a portfolio filled with breathtaking sketches and innovative concepts, but she put it all aside to support his dream, taking the first job she could find when they moved for his career. She served greasy burgers and wiped down sticky tables so he could wear sharp suits and talk about synergy and deliverables. "My tips have been good," she offered weakly, hating how small her voice sounded. "And I can pick up more shifts. After the baby comes, I can do freelance work from home. We can make it work, Alex. People do it all the time." "We're not people," he exploded, slamming his hand on the back of the worn-out sofa. Dust motes danced in the dim light. "I'm not going to be one of those guys stuck in middle management forever because he got knocked up too early. I have goals. I have potential. This," he gestured vaguely at her stomach, "this holds me back. It holds us back." The cruelty of it stole her breath. He wasn't just talking about money anymore. He was talking about her, about their child, as a weight, a burden he was unwilling to carry. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and blurring the tired face of the man she loved. "How can you say that?" she choked out. "This is a part of us, a part of our love." "Love doesn't pay the rent, Izzy. Love doesn't get you a corner office." He stepped closer, his face contorted with a mix of panic and resentment. "I need to focus. I need to be lean, agile. I can't be weighed down by all of this." The silence returned, heavier this time, suffocating. Isabella looked around the tiny apartment they had called home, his framed business degree on the wall, her forgotten sketchbook peeking out from under a stack of his trade magazines. Every inch of the space was a testament to his ambition and her sacrifice, and now he was telling her the sacrifice wasn't enough. She herself was the problem. She finally looked up, meeting his eyes. They were cold, distant, the eyes of a stranger calculating profit and loss. In that moment, she saw their future not as he planned it, but as it would truly be. Her, shrinking into the background, her dreams gathering dust, while he climbed his corporate ladder, shedding pieces of his humanity with every rung. "What are you saying, Alex?" she asked, her voice eerily calm. He took a deep breath, the final fatal plunge. "I'm saying I can't do this. Not now, not with you, like this." He couldn't even bring himself to say the word pregnant. It was a mistake. We were careless. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. "The baby is not a mistake." Then maybe we are, he shot back, his voice like ice. The finality in his tone was absolute. He looked at her, this woman who had believed in him, who had loved him, who was carrying his child, and he saw only an obstacle. He gestured to the door. I think you should go. The words hung in the air, unbelievable, obscene. Go? Go where, Alex? It's pouring rain. It's after midnight. This is my home. It's my name on the lease, he said. The words precise and brutal. I need space. I need to think. I can't do it with you here. Just pack a bag and go. Go to a friend's place. I don't care. Just leave. The coldness was more painful than any shout. He had already moved on. In his mind, she was already gone, a problem solved. The love she thought was the foundation of their lives was, to him, just a line item he was choosing to cut. Slowly, numbly, Isabella rose from the table. She didn't cry anymore. A strange, glacial calm settled over her. She walked into their small bedroom, the scent of his cologne hanging in the air, and pulled a small duffel bag from the top of the closet. She packed methodically, not thinking, just moving. A few changes of clothes, her toothbrush, her sketchbook, the one thing that was truly hers. She paused, her hand hovering over a framed photo on the nightstand, the two of them smiling on a beach a lifetime ago. With a steady hand, she turned it face down. When she walked back into the living room, Alex was standing by the window, staring out at the rain-slicked street, his back to her. He didn't turn, he didn't offer her money, or an umbrella, or a single word of regret. She stood by the door for a long moment, the duffel bag feeling impossibly heavy in her hand. She wanted to scream, to rage, to throw something, to make him see the enormity of what he was doing. But she knew it would be pointless. He had already built a wall around his heart, and on the other side was his precious 5-year plan. Goodbye, Alex, she said softly to his unmoving back. There was no reply. She opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. The click of the lock behind her was the loudest sound she had ever heard. It was the sound of her life breaking in two. As she walked down the stairs and out into the cold, unforgiving rain, she clutched her stomach, a silent promise to the tiny life within her. They were on their own now. 5 years is a long time. It's long enough for wounds to scar over, for memories to fade from sharp-edged pain to a dull, persistent ache. For Alex Sterling, it was long enough to achieve everything he had set out to do. He had the condo, a sleek, minimalist space on the 27th floor with panoramic views of the city he had conquered. The furniture was chrome and leather, the art on the walls was abstract and expensive, and the silence was absolute. He had the car, a silver German sedan that hummed with quiet power. He had the suits, tailored, dark and numerous, and he had the job. Senior project manager at Innovate Solutions. He had a team under him, a 6-figure salary, and the grudging respect of his peers. He had, by every metric of his 5-year plan, succeeded, and he was profoundly, miserably empty. The victory felt hollow. The condo was just a place to sleep, the car just a way to get to work, the job just a series of endless meetings and pressure-filled deadlines. He had climbed his ladder only to find the view from the top was sterile and lonely. He dated, of course, women like Chloe, an art gallery curator with a sharp haircut and an even sharper wit. She looked good on his arm at corporate events and never asked for more than he was willing to give, which wasn't much. They had conversations that skimmed the surface of life, like stones skipping over deep water, never once breaking the tension to see what lay beneath. Sometimes, in the dead of night, when the city lights felt less like a testament to his success and more like a million indifferent eyes, Isabella would creep into his thoughts. He would remember the warmth of her laugh, the way she would chew on her pencil when she was sketching, the smell of the cheap lavender soap she used. He'd feel a phantom pang of regret, a ghost of a question. What if? He told himself he had made the right choice, the necessary choice. He was a success. He had streamlined his life for optimal performance. Attachments were liabilities. A wife, a child. They would have been anchors, just as he'd feared. He would see men in his office, like his colleague David, rushing home at 5 o'clock sharp for a child's soccer game or a parent-teacher conference, their faces etched with a tired happiness Alex couldn't comprehend. He pitied them. Or he told himself he did. But the ghost of Isabella remained. He had tried to find her once, a year after she left. A half-hearted, guilt-ridden search online yielded nothing. It was as if she had vanished from the face of the earth. He assumed she had gone back to her parents, defeated, and had quietly moved on with her life. The thought brought a strange mix of relief and a sharp, unpleasant jab of something that felt like shame. Today, however, there was no time for introspection. A current of electric anxiety was running through the offices of Innovate Solutions. Mr. Harrison, the aging, affable CEO who had built the company from the ground up, had finally retired. And in his wake came the news that had sent shockwaves through every department. Innovate Solutions had been acquired. The buyer wasn't a local competitor or a Silicon Valley giant. It was a name none of them had heard before, a mysterious and powerful European conglomerate called Ethelgard Enterprises. Rumors flew through the hushed cubicles and whispered over the coffee machine. They were said to be ruthless, efficient, and fantastically wealthy. They were known for acquiring promising companies, stripping them for their most valuable assets, and discarding the rest. Everyone was on edge. Layoffs were not a possibility, they were a certainty. The only question was who and when. Alex, however, saw an opportunity. This was the shake-up he needed. A chance to prove his worth to a new, more powerful set of masters. He spent the entire week preparing, refining a presentation on his department's key projects, memorizing performance metrics, and ensuring his team looked sharp and productive. He was determined to be one of the assets Ethelgard kept, not one of the liabilities they discarded. The day of the big announcement arrived. An all-hands meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the main conference room. The air in the office was thick with the smell of nervous sweat and stale coffee. Alex stood by his desk, adjusting his silk tie in the reflection of his monitor. He looked the part, cool, confident, indispensable. Inside, his heart hammered against his ribs. David walked over, loosening his own collar. Nervous? Focused, Alex corrected. This is a major opportunity, Dave. New leadership, new vision. This is how careers are made. David sighed, running a hand over his tired face. Or ended. I was up all night with my daughter, Amelia. She has an ear infection. All I can think about is what happens to my family's health insurance if they let me go. Alex felt a flash of irritation. This was the kind of thinking that held people like David back. The messy, inconvenient, emotional baggage. Just focus on the work, David. Make yourself essential. That's all that matters. David gave him a long, strange look. Right, the work. He walked away, leaving Alex to his solitary ambition. At 10 o'clock sharp, they all filed into the conference room. It was packed. Even the senior partners, men who usually exuded an aura of untouchable calm, looked tense. Alex secured a seat in the third row, close enough to be seen, but not so close as to seem presumptuous. Mr. Harrison stood at the podium at the front of the room, looking smaller and older than Alex had ever seen him. He gave a brief, emotional farewell speech, his voice thick with nostalgia. Then he cleared his throat, his expression shifting to one of formal introduction. As you all know, he began, his voice amplified by the microphone, Innovate Solutions is beginning a new chapter. We have been acquired by a truly dynamic and forward-thinking organization, Ethelgard Enterprises. A murmur went through the crowd. They have a bold new vision for our future, and to lead us in that vision, they have sent their very best. Harrison paused, looking towards the large double doors at the back of the room. The board and I have been incredibly impressed by her acumen, her passion, and her revolutionary approach to the tech industry. It is my great honor to introduce you to the new CEO of Innovate Solutions, the head of global strategy for Ethelgard Enterprises. The doors swung open, all heads turned. Alex craned his neck, a professionally curious smile fixed on his face, ready to impress, ready to begin the next phase of his meticulously planned life. His world was about to change, he just had no idea how completely. The silence in the conference room was absolute, a held breath of 150 employees. The double doors at the back of the room remained open, framing the figure who stood there. For a moment, all Alex could see was a silhouette against the bright light of the hallway. A figure of undeniable presence, flanked by two severe-looking individuals who radiated an air of quiet authority. Then she moved. She walked into the room with a fluid, unhurried grace that commanded attention. The sound of her heels on the polished concrete floor was a crisp, rhythmic counterpoint to the frantic beating of Alex's heart. She wasn't just walking, she was processing. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, swept across the room, taking in every face, every detail, with a cool, appraising gaze. She was dressed in a tailored suit of deep charcoal grey that fit her perfectly. It was a statement of power, modern and severe, yet undeniably feminine. Her dark hair was pulled back into a sleek, elegant chignon at the nape of her neck, not a single strand out of place. On her wrist was a simple, elegant watch that probably cost more than Alex's car. She carried nothing but an aura of complete and total control. Alex's professional smile remained plastered on his face, but a strange sense of unease began to prickle at the back of his neck. There was something familiar in her posture, in the elegant line of her neck, in the way she held her head, a ghost of a memory, a half-forgotten dream. He dismissed it as a trick of the light, the product of a high-stress morning. She reached the front of the room and shook Mr. Harrison's hand, a brief, firm gesture. He looked almost flustered in her presence, like a kindly schoolteacher meeting a visiting dignitary. She gave him a small, polite nod and then turned to face the room, to face them, and the light from the large panoramic window caught her face. For Alex, the world didn't just slow down. It stopped. The low hum of the air conditioning, the rustle of papers, the sound of his own breathing, it all vanished. There was only her face. The features were the same, yet entirely different. The heart-shaped face he had once known was leaner now, sculpted by maturity and confidence. The soft, gentle eyes that had once looked at him with such adoration were now sharp, focused, and held a depth he couldn't begin to fathom. The mouth that had once curved into an easy, shy smile was now set in a line of cool, professional neutrality. It was Isabella. But it wasn't. The woman he knew was gone. The waitress with paint-stained fingers and a perpetually hopeful smile. The girl who wore faded jeans and his old college sweatshirts. The partner who had believed in his dreams more than her own. She had been erased. In her place stood this formidable creature, this titan of industry who exuded more power and self-possession in her little finger than Alex had ever felt in his entire life. The nameplate on the podium was changed by an assistant. It read, Isabella Rossi. Rossi, her maiden name. She had reclaimed it. She had shed every last trace of him. Mr. Harrison, oblivious to the personal cataclysm unfolding in the third row, completed his introduction. Please join me in giving a warm, Innovate Solutions welcome to Ms. Isabella Rossi. A wave of polite, nervous applause filled the room. Alex's hands remained frozen in his lap. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. His blood had turned to ice water in his veins. His carefully constructed reality, the one he had built on the wreckage of their relationship, was fracturing around him, cracking like thin ice under an immense, impossible weight. Isabella stepped to the podium. She didn't smile. She simply surveyed the crowd, her gaze passing over the sea of faces. For a terrifying, heart-stopping second, her eyes met Alex's. There was no flicker of recognition, no shock, no anger, nothing. It was the look a queen might give a stone in the castle wall, a brief impersonal acknowledgement of its existence before moving on. To her, he was just another employee, another face in the crowd, a cog in the machine she now owned. The anonymity of it was more devastating than any confrontation could have been. Then she began to speak. Her voice filled the room, and it was the second shockwave to hit Alex. The soft, sometimes hesitant voice he remembered was gone. This voice was clear, confident, and carried an accent he didn't recognize. A subtle, cultured cadence that hinted at years spent in Europe. It was the voice of command. "Good morning," she began. "My name is Isabella Rossi. As of 9 a.m. this morning, Ethelgard Enterprises has completed its acquisition of Innovate Solutions. I want to thank Mr. Harrison for his decades of service and for building a company with a strong foundation. A foundation we intend to build upon." She spoke of vision, of synergy, of leveraging core assets for global expansion. She used the very language Alex prided himself on, but she did it with an authority and an innate understanding that made his own corporate jargon sound like a child's imitation. She was fluent in the language of power because she lived it. Ethelgard does not invest in mediocrity, she continued, her voice hardening slightly. We invest in potential. We have acquired this company for one primary reason, your proprietary AI integration patent. It is a brilliant piece of technology that we believe can be scaled to revolutionize 3 different sectors. But technology is only as good as the people who develop and manage it. Her eyes swept the room again. Over the next few weeks, my team and I will be conducting a full operational review. Every department, every project, and every position will be evaluated. We are looking for efficiency, for innovation, and for passion. We will be streamlining operations. Some roles will be redefined, some will be made redundant. A wave of fear rippled through the audience. Alex felt it too, but it was a distant, secondary emotion. His primary feeling was a dizzying, nauseating vertigo. The woman who was deciding his fate, the fate of his entire career, was the same woman he had thrown out into the rain 5 years ago. The woman who was carrying his child. The child. The thought hit him with the force of a physical blow, knocking the last of the air from his lungs. What happened to the baby? For 5 years, he had successfully pushed that question into the darkest corner of his mind, a locked room he never visited. Now the door had been blown off its hinges. Was there a child? A 5-year-old boy or girl somewhere in the world with his eyes or his smile? A child he had called a mistake? He stared at Isabella, really stared at her, searching for any sign, any clue. But her face was an unreadable mask of corporate poise. She was talking about Q4 projections and market penetration strategies, her expression as calm and controlled as if she were discussing the weather. The meeting ended. Another round of applause, this one more subdued, more fearful. Isabella gave a curt nod and was immediately surrounded by her entourage, who whisked her away towards the executive offices. The room erupted in a cacophony of panicked whispers, people huddled in small groups, their faces pale. Did you see her? She's not messing around. Redundant. That means layoffs. Alex didn't hear them. He sat paralyzed in his chair, the noise of the room fading into a dull roar. His 5-year plan, his success, his condo. It all felt like a joke, a pathetic, hollow charade. He had spent 5 years building a tiny kingdom of one, while she had gone out and built an empire. He had told her she was an anchor, a weight holding him back. But he was the one who was sinking, drowning in the shallow pool of his own ambition. And she had soared. David clapped a hand on his shoulder, making him jump. Man, that was intense. She's something else. You okay, Alex? You look like you've seen a ghost. Alex looked up at his colleague, his eyes wide with a terror David couldn't possibly understand. Worse, Alex croaked, his voice a dry rasp. Much, much worse. The rest of the day passed in a surreal haze for Alex. He stumbled back to his cubicle, the fluorescent lights of the office feeling harsh and accusatory, the familiar mundane environment of his workspace, the neat stacks of files, the motivational poster on the wall that read, "Success is the only option," the faint hum of his computer, all seemed alien, like a set from a play in which he had forgotten all his lines. His colleagues buzzed with a nervous energy, dissecting every word Isabella had spoken, every nuance of her tone. She's brilliant, said Maria from accounting, her eyes wide. I looked her up. Ethelgard's stock has tripled since she took over global strategy 2 years ago. They call her the Velvet Hammer. I heard she came from nothing, Kevin from marketing chimed in, leaning over the cubicle wall. Some articles said her grandfather was Lorenzo Rossi, the reclusive founder of Ethelgard. He found her a few years ago, and she just skyrocketed. A total genius. Alex felt a wave of nausea. Lorenzo Rossi. He vaguely remembered Isabella mentioning a grandfather in Italy, a man her mother was estranged from. She had never met him. So that was it. She hadn't just gotten lucky, she had stepped into a dynasty. But Kevin's words, she just skyrocketed, felt wrong. This wasn't just inherited power. The woman he saw at the podium had earned her place. The steel in her spine hadn't been gifted to her, it had been forged. Forged in the fire he had pushed her into. He tried to work, he opened the presentation he had so meticulously prepared, the one meant to secure his future. The charts and graphs, once a source of pride, now seemed laughably insignificant. He was planning to present his tiny strategic vision to a woman who moved markets with a single decision. It was like showing a child's crayon drawing to a master artist. He couldn't focus. His mind kept replaying the moment her eyes had met his. The utter lack of recognition. It was impossible. She had to have known he was there, which meant the blank look was a choice, a deliberate, calculated act of dismissal. She was showing him his new place in the universe. He was nothing to her. The thought was more chilling than any expression of hatred. Late in the afternoon, the inevitable happened. An email announced that the new CEO would be touring the main office floor to familiarize herself with the team. A fresh wave of panic swept the department. Keyboards clattered furiously. People straightened their ties and smoothed their hair. Alex felt his blood run cold. He wanted to run, to hide in the men's room, to feign a sudden illness and flee the building. But that would be an act of cowardice, a confirmation of his insignificance. He had to face her. He had to see, up close, if there was anything left of the woman he once knew. He saw them coming down the main aisle long before they reached his section. Isabella was in the lead, her senior vice president, a stern-looking man with silver hair at her side. Her department head, Mr. Thompson, trotted along nervously, pointing out key personnel and stammering explanations of their roles. She moved with an unnerving purpose, her gaze sharp and analytical. She would stop at a desk, ask a pointed question about a project, listen intently to the answer with her head tilted slightly, and then offer a curt nod before moving on. She absorbed information with a frightening efficiency. Then they were at his department. Alex's heart felt like it was trying to hammer its way out of his chest. He stood up, as was protocol, his hands clammy, his mouth as dry as desert sand. Mr. Thompson gestured towards him. "And this is Alex Sterling, our senior project manager for the Phoenix Initiative. Alex has been instrumental in streamlining our workflow and increasing departmental efficiency by 12% over the last 2 years." The introduction, meant to impress, sounded pathetic in the face of the woman who owned the whole company. Isabella's eyes, a deep, rich brown he now saw, were flecked with gold, settled on him. This time there was no crowd to hide in. It was just him and her, separated by 3 feet of corporate carpeting that felt like a chasm. He searched her face for a sign, a flicker, a crack in the perfect polished facade. He saw nothing. Her expression was one of mild professional interest. "Mr. Sterling," she said. Her voice, so close, was even more devastating. It was smooth, controlled, and utterly devoid of emotion. She said his name as if she were reading it for the first time. "The Phoenix Initiative," she continued, her gaze dropping to the chart on his monitor. "Your projections are based on a market growth of 7% year over year. What is your contingency for a market correction of, say, 5%? And how have you insulated the project supply chain from the recent volatility in the South Asian microchip sector?" The questions were sharp, insightful, and exposed a potential weakness in his planning he hadn't fully considered. He was flawed. She had glanced at his work for less than 5 seconds and had already identified its 2 most vulnerable points. He opened his mouth to answer, but his mind was a blank slate. All he could think about was her, standing in their old apartment, her face streaked with tears. He could almost smell the rain from that night. We have a risk mitigation strategy," he stammered, his voice sounding weak and uncertain even to his own ears. "The numbers. I can pull up the relevant files." He was fumbling. He, Alex Sterling, the master of data, the king of the confident presentation, was falling apart. Isabella didn't wait. She gave a single, almost imperceptible nod, her expression unchanging. It was a look of assessment, and he knew, with a sickening certainty, that he had been found wanting. "See that I get that report on my desk by 9 a.m. tomorrow, Mr. Sterling," she said, her tone leaving no room for discussion. She had already dismissed him. Her attention was already moving on. She turned to Mr. Thompson. "Let's move on to the R&D department. I want to see the prototype for the new neural interface." And just like that, she was gone, sweeping down the aisle with her entourage, leaving a wake of awe and fear. Alex sank back into his chair, his legs suddenly weak. His colleagues were staring at him, a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity in their eyes. He had been weighed, measured, and found lacking by the new CEO, but it was so much worse than that. He had been weighed, measured, and found lacking by Isabella. He stared at his computer screen, at the project that had been his entire world for the past year. He felt nothing for it. All he could see was her face, calm and impassive. All he could hear was her voice, calling him Mr. Sterling. It was a masterful, brutal performance. She had erased him. In her world, he didn't exist as anything more than a mid-level employee, a name on an org chart. She had not only survived the night he cast her out, she had used it as fuel. She had rebuilt herself from the ashes of the life they had shared, and she had come back as a goddess of fire and vengeance, cloaked in a designer suit. And the most terrifying part, he didn't think it was about vengeance at all. He had a chilling realization that he wasn't important enough for her to want revenge on. This was just business. He was just a loose end from a forgotten past, and she was simply, efficiently tying it off. His hands trembled as he reached for his mouse, trying to pull up the files she had requested. But his mind was a storm. The question, the one that had been dormant for 5 years, was now screaming at him, demanding an answer. What happened to our baby? Sleep did not come for Alex that night. He lay in his king-sized bed, the expensive Egyptian cotton sheets feeling like sandpaper against his skin. The panoramic view of the city from his bedroom window, usually a source of pride, now felt like a mockery. Each glittering light was a reminder of a world that continued to spin on, oblivious to the fact that his own had just been knocked off its axis. He had spent hours at the office, frantically compiling the report Isabella had demanded. His usual sharp focus was gone, replaced by a frantic, jittery energy. Every number he typed, every chart he created, felt like an offering to an angry god. He was trying to prove his competence to the woman whose potential he had so arrogantly dismissed. The irony was a bitter pill. He left the office well after midnight, the report printed and sealed in an envelope for her desk. But leaving work didn't bring escape. Her image was seared onto the back of his eyelids. Isabella at the podium. Isabella at his desk. Isabella, her eyes cool and distant, calling him Mr. Sterling. He got out of bed and paced the cold, hardwood floors of his silent condo. He went to the kitchen and poured a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid doing nothing to quell the tremor in his hands. He was a man besieged by ghosts. The ghost of the young woman he had loved, the ghost of the man he used to be, and the most terrifying ghost of all, the ghost of a child he had never known. He couldn't stand it anymore. He needed answers. Flipping open his laptop, he sat at his sleek glass dining table and began to dig. He started with her name, Isabella Rossi. The results flooded his screen, a tidal wave of information that pulled him under. There were dozens of articles from Forbes, the Wall Street Journal, and international business magazines. The Milan Miracle, how Isabella Rossi revitalized a tech empire. Ethelgard's New Queen, the quiet rise of a corporate titan. From obscurity to oracle, the Isabella Rossi story. He clicked on the first one, a feature piece from a major financial publication. It included a photo of her, not in a severe business suit, but in a stunning evening gown at a charity gala in Geneva. She was laughing, her head thrown back, a diamond necklace glittering at her throat. She looked vibrant, happy, and utterly untouchable. The article sketched out the narrative his colleagues had whispered about. Daughter of an Italian-American art historian, showed early promise in design. Then a gap. The article called it her lost years, a period around 5 years ago where she seemed to fall off the grid. Alex felt a cold dread creep up his spine. Her lost years were the year she was with him, the year she was pregnant. Then the story resumed. She had re-emerged in Milan, Italy, where she took on a small freelance project for a struggling software company. Her user interface design was so intuitive, so revolutionary, that it turned the failing app into a viral sensation. That success brought her to the attention of one man, Lorenzo Rossi, her maternal grandfather. The legendary founder of Ethelgard Enterprises was old, reclusive, and without an heir. He had been estranged from his only daughter, Isabella's mother, for decades. But intrigued by this brilliant young designer who shared his name, he had sought her out. He tested her, gave her small projects within his vast empire, and was consistently astounded by her natural business acumen, her relentless work ethic, and her visionary ideas. She wasn't just his blood, she was his successor in spirit. He officially named her his heir and began to train her, not just giving her a position, but making her earn it every step of the way. She didn't just inherit the kingdom, she learned how to rule it. When Lorenzo passed away 2 years ago, she didn't just take the throne, she solidified its power, expanding the company's reach and profitability in ways even her legendary grandfather hadn't envisioned. Alex read until his eyes burned. He devoured every article, every interview. In one, she was asked about her personal philosophy. "I believe in turning liabilities into assets," she had said, her voice calm and measured in the accompanying video clip. "Every obstacle is an opportunity to innovate. Every weakness is a chance to build a new strength. You must be willing to discard what is holding you back in order to move forward." He flinched as if she had struck him. She was using his own cold, ruthless language, the same philosophy he had used to justify throwing her out. But while he had used it to achieve a hollow, mid-level success, she had used it to build an empire. But none of the articles, for all their talk of her meteoric rise, mentioned a child. There was no mention of a husband, a partner, or a family. Her personal life was a complete black box. This was a deliberate omission. A woman of her stature, her every business move scrutinized, would have to work very hard to keep a child a secret, which meant the child either didn't exist, or she was protecting them with the same fierce, strategic intelligence she applied to her company. Desperation gnawed at him. He had to know. He couldn't live in this state of agonizing uncertainty. His entire career, his future, was now in her hands. But that was secondary. The question of the child had become the single most important thing in his universe. He decided on a course of action, a reckless, unprofessional impulse born of sheer desperation. He would try to talk to her, not as Mr. Sterling, the employee, but as Alex, the man from her past. He had to break through the corporate armor she wore. The next day, he was a wreck. He survived the morning meetings in a fog, his report on her desk as requested, though he received no acknowledgement of it. He watched her from a distance, a whirlwind of controlled energy, moving from meeting to meeting, always surrounded by her team. Getting to her would be like trying to get an audience with a queen. He tried the direct approach first. He emailed her. Subject: a personal matter. Isabella. I know this is highly inappropriate, but I need to speak with you. Just for 5 minutes. It's about... before. Please. Alex. An automated reply came back instantly. Thank you for your message. Ms. Rossi's schedule is managed by her executive office. Please direct all inquiries to her assistant, Evelyn Hayes. He then tried to go to the executive floor. He was stopped at the elevator bank by a formidable-looking security guard who politely but firmly informed him that the 40th floor was accessible by keycard only. His desperation grew. He felt like a ghost haunting the edges of her new life. He waited until the end of the day. He watched from his window as the parking lot slowly emptied. He knew which car was hers, a sleek black Audi with tinted windows, always parked in the reserved CEO spot near the entrance. He saw her driver get in and start the engine. This was his last chance. He grabbed his briefcase and practically ran from the building. He got to the executive parking area just as Isabella was walking out of the main doors, flanked by her silver-haired VP and her assistant, Evelyn, a sharp woman in her 40s with an iPad seemingly attached to her hand. Alex, what are you doing? He froze. It was Chloe, his girlfriend, walking towards her own car. She looked at him, then at the scene unfolding near the CEO's car, her brow furrowed in confusion. Are you trying to ambush the new boss? A little desperate, don't you think? He ignored her. Chloe, not now. He strode forward, his heart pounding. Isabella, he called out. The three of them stopped. The VP and Evelyn turned, their expressions a mixture of surprise and annoyance. Isabella turned last, her movement slow and deliberate. She looked at him, standing there in the fading light of the parking lot. Her face was unreadable. Evelyn, the assistant, stepped forward, a human shield. Mr. Sterling, Ms. Rossi is leaving for the day. If you have a business matter, please schedule an appointment through the proper channels." "This isn't a business matter," Alex said, his eyes locked on Isabella's. "Please, Izzy, just 5 minutes." The use of her old nickname hung in the air, a relic from another world. He saw a flicker of something in her eyes, the first genuine emotion he had seen from her. It wasn't warmth, it was ice. "Evelyn," Isabella said, her voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable edge of command, "handle this." She didn't give him another glance. She turned, got into the back of the waiting Audi, and the door was closed behind her. The car pulled away smoothly, its taillights disappearing into the evening traffic. He was left standing there, humiliated, dismissed in front of his girlfriend and her senior staff. Evelyn Hayes turned to him, her expression one of polite professional disdain. "Mr. Sterling, let me be perfectly clear. Ms. Rossi's time is her most valuable asset. Unsolicited attempts to engage with her outside of professional protocols are not appreciated. If you do this again, I will have to report it to Human Resources and Building Security. Do you understand?" Alex could only nod, his throat tight. As Evelyn turned and walked crisply away, Chloe came up beside him. "Wow," she said, a note of something between shock and amusement in her voice. "She really put you in your place. I guess that's what they mean by velvet hammer. So what was so important you were willing to risk your career for it?" Alex stared at the spot where the car had been, the question screaming in his mind. He couldn't tell Chloe. He couldn't tell anyone. It was a secret buried 5 years deep, and the only person with the answers had just driven away, leaving him utterly, completely alone with his ghosts. The humiliation in the parking lot was a turning point for Alex. The polite but firm rejections, the corporate walls, the human shields like Evelyn Hayes. They weren't just obstacles, they were a message. Isabella was not going to give him an easy path to the answers he so desperately craved. If he wanted to break through her defenses, he couldn't be Alex Sterling, senior project manager. He had to be someone she couldn't ignore. But how? He held no power over her. In her world, he was a speck of dust. The more he thought about it, the more one single agonizing question consumed him, eclipsing even his professional anxieties. Was there a child? His obsession deepened, turning his days into a blur of feigned productivity and his nights into a frantic spiral of online research. He abandoned the business journals and started digging deeper, into social media, into public records, into the murky corners of the internet where information hides. He searched for birth records in the city for the period 9 months after she left. Nothing under her name or his. He searched for school enrollments, pediatric patient lists, dead end after dead end. She had covered her tracks with the same meticulous precision she applied to a corporate takeover. Then he found a crack. It was a small, obscure society blog from Milan covering a high-profile charity auction held 3 years prior. There was a gallery of photos. He scrolled through pictures of smiling Italian socialites and politicians until one image made him stop. It was Isabella. She was standing with an older, distinguished-looking man, Lorenzo Rossi, he presumed. She was wearing a simple black dress, and she looked beautiful. But that's not what caught his eye. In her arms, she was holding a small child, a toddler of perhaps 1 or 2 years old. The boy was looking away from the camera, his face partially obscured, but his hair was a familiar shade of dark brown. Isabella was looking down at the child, and the expression on her face was one he had never seen on her, not even in their happiest moments. It was a look of fierce, profound, unconditional love. A mother's love. Alex's breath hitched. He zoomed in on the photo, the image pixelating. He couldn't see the boy's face clearly, but it didn't matter. He knew. In the deepest, most terrified part of his soul, he knew. He had a son. The knowledge didn't bring clarity. It brought a new kind of torment. A son he had never met, never held. A son he had unknowingly abandoned. A son who was being raised in a world of unimaginable wealth and privilege by a mother who was now a stranger to him. The professional humiliation he felt paled in comparison to this new, crushing weight of personal failure. His ambition, his 5-year plan, the sacrifices he had made, they had all been for nothing. He hadn't just lost a partner, he had lost a family. He had traded a son for a corner office he didn't even have yet. He knew he couldn't give up. He had to find a way to speak to her, not to reclaim her or to demand a place in his son's life. What right did he have? But he needed to see her, to face her, and to say the words he should have said 5 years ago. He needed to apologize. He needed to atone. His chance came a week later, born from the very work he now found so meaningless. Isabella had called a late-night emergency meeting for the senior managers of the company's most critical projects. The Phoenix Initiative was one of them. A major competitor had just launched a rival product, and Ethelgard's market projections were now at risk. The meeting was held in the main boardroom on the 40th floor. It was the first time Alex had been in the executive suite. The space was intimidating, all glass and steel, with a breathtaking view of the city at night. Isabella sat at the head of the massive table, not a CEO in a suit, but a general in her war room. She was wearing a simple dark sweater, her hair was slightly less perfect, and she looked tired but energized, her eyes blazing with intensity. She was ruthless in her questioning, dismantling each manager's strategy with surgical precision. She demanded innovation, not excuses. She wanted solutions, not problems. When it was Alex's turn, he was ready. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about his career. He was thinking about the little boy in the photograph. He spoke with a clarity and passion he hadn't felt in years, outlining a bold, risky strategy to pivot their project to counter the competitor's move. For the first time since she had arrived, Isabella looked at him with something other than dismissal. She listened intently, a flicker of genuine interest in her eyes. When he was finished, the room was silent. "It's aggressive," she said finally, her fingers steepled under her chin. "The risk of failure is 60%. "The risk of failure if we do nothing is 100%, Alex countered, his voice steady. A slow smile touched her lips. It was a small, fleeting thing, but it transformed her face, a brief glimpse of the woman she used to be. "Execute it," she said. "I want a progress report on my desk every morning. Meeting adjourned." It was almost 11 p.m. The other managers filed out, muttering about the new, impossible deadlines. Alex lingered, packing his briefcase slowly, his heart hammering. This was his moment. Isabella remained at the table, looking over some notes. Her assistant, Evelyn, was packing up her own things. "Evelyn," Isabella said, not looking up, "could you have the car brought around? And call Marco, tell him I'm running about 30 minutes late. He'll know what to do." Evelyn nodded and left the boardroom, closing the heavy glass door behind her. They were alone. The silence was deafening. Alex's throat was dry. He took a step towards the table. "Isabella," he said, his voice barely a whisper. She looked up, her expression immediately hardening, the brief warmth from the meeting gone, replaced by a guarded, weary coldness. "Mr. Sterling, the meeting is over." "I saw a picture," he blurted out, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "From a charity event in Milan. You were holding a little boy." Her face became a mask of ice. She slowly closed her laptop, her movements deliberate, controlled. "My personal life is not a subject for discussion." "He looks to be about 4 years old in the picture," Alex pressed on, his voice shaking, "which would make him 5 now. Our son, Isabella. We have a son." She stood up, her chair scraping softly against the floor. She was a few inches shorter than him, but in that moment she towered over him, her presence filling the room. "Let me be very clear," she said, her voice dangerously low, each word a perfectly enunciated shard of glass. "I have a son. His name is Leonardo. He is the most important thing in my life. You have nothing." "I didn't know," he pleaded, the dam of his composure finally breaking. "I was a fool, Izzy. I was an arrogant, stupid, scared fool. I was so obsessed with what I wanted to become that I threw away the only thing that ever mattered. There hasn't been a day in 5 years that I haven't regretted it." "Regret?" She let out a short, bitter laugh, a sound utterly devoid of humor. "You feel regret?" "Regret is a luxury, Alex. Do you know what I felt? I felt the cold pavement of a bus station bench because I didn't have enough money for a motel room. I felt the hunger pangs because I was trying to save every dollar for the baby you called a mistake. I felt the terror of giving birth alone in a foreign country, praying that my child would be healthy. Your regret doesn't even begin to compare to what I endured." Every word was a punch to his gut, leaving him breathless. He had imagined she had gone back to her parents, to a soft landing. The reality of her struggle, the one he had forced upon her, was a horror he couldn't comprehend. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the words feeling pitiful and inadequate. "God, Isabella, I am so sorry." "Sorry doesn't change anything," she said, her voice flat. "It doesn't give me back the nights I cried myself to sleep. It doesn't erase the fear. And it certainly doesn't give you any rights to my son." "I'm not asking for rights," he said, tears welling in his eyes. "I lost that right. I know that. I need to know. Is he okay? Is he happy?" Her expression softened, just for a second. A flicker of the mother he had seen in the photograph. "He is more than okay," she said, a quiet pride in her voice. "He is brilliant, and funny, and kind. He is everything good in the world. And he is mine. I am his whole world, and he is mine. I have protected him from everything, and that includes you." The finality of her words was like a death sentence. She was the gatekeeper to the most important part of his life, and she would never let him in. "The acquisition of this company," Alex asked, a dawning, sickening realization spreading through him. Was it about me?" She looked at him, a genuine cold pity in her eyes. "You think you are that important? That I would move a multi-billion-dollar global enterprise for a man I haven't thought about in years? No, Alex, this was never about you. Innovate Solutions holds a patent that is crucial to Ethelgard's next 5-year plan. It was a strategic acquisition. You are just an unfortunate coincidence, a piece of old, forgotten business I now have to manage." She had taken his life's work, his ambition, his entire identity, and reduced it to an unfortunate coincidence. The humiliation was absolute. She picked up her briefcase. "I have a son to get home to. We're done here, Mr. Sterling. From now on, our interactions will be strictly professional. And believe me, I will be watching your project's performance very, very closely." She walked towards the door, her steps confident and final. She was leaving, taking with her the last hope he had. He was about to be left alone again in the sterile, silent boardroom that represented the pinnacle of his pathetic ambition. But as her hand touched the door handle, it swung open. Evelyn Hayes stood there, and behind her, holding her hand, was a little boy with wide, curious brown eyes and a head of unruly dark hair. Alex's hair. He was wearing a small peacoat and looked sleepy. "Mommy?" the boy said, his voice small and clear. "Marco said you were in a long meeting." The entire world seemed to tilt on its axis. Alex stared at the child, his child Leonardo. He could see his own features mirrored in the boy's face, mixed with the delicate shape of Isabella's jaw and her intelligent eyes. He was real. He was perfect. Isabella's entire demeanor changed in an instant. The Ice Queen vanished, replaced by a mother whose face was flooded with pure, radiant love. She knelt down, her expensive briefcase forgotten on the floor. "I'm so sorry, my love," she murmured, her voice soft and warm, a voice Alex hadn't heard in 5 years. "The meeting ran late. Are you ready to go home and read about the dinosaurs?" The boy, Leo, nodded, his eyes lighting up. Then his gaze drifted past his mother and landed on Alex, who was standing frozen, a statue of grief and regret. "Who's that?" Leo asked, his voice filled with innocent curiosity. Alex's heart stopped. He waited for her answer, for the lie, for the dismissal. Isabella paused. She looked from her son's curious face to Alex's shattered one. She stood up slowly, a complex, unreadable expression in her eyes. She made a decision. She took Leo's hand. "Leo," she said, her voice steady and calm, "that is Mr. Sterling. He works with me." "Mr. Sterling. Not your father, not an old friend, a colleague, a stranger." She had drawn the final insurmountable line. She smiled down at her son, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, which were still locked on Alex. "Come on, sweet boy, let's go home." She led Leo out of the room, her hand protectively on his shoulder. Leo glanced back at Alex one last time, a brief, childish glance, before disappearing down the hallway. Alex was left alone in the boardroom, the silence ringing in his ears. He could still see his son's face, still hear his voice. He had been in the same room as his child for the first time in his life, and he had been introduced as Mr. Sterling. He stumbled over to the vast window and looked down at the city below. The glittering lights no longer looked like a kingdom he had conquered. They looked like a cage. He had gotten everything he thought he ever wanted. The job, the money, the success. And in exchange, he had given up a universe. He watched as a black Audi pulled out of the parking garage 40 floors below, its headlights cutting a swift path through the darkness. He knew they were in that car, mother and son, heading towards a life he would never be a part of. A life he had thrown away in the rain, one miserable, misguided night 5 years ago. He had told his pregnant wife to leave, and she had. She had left and built a new world for herself, a world with a crown, a kingdom, and a beautiful son. A world where he was nothing more than Mr. Sterling. And as he watched the taillights disappear, he knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that he would be paying the price for the rest of his life.